Hi, good afternoon, viewers, and welcome to Matters of Public Importance on Channel 6, right here. I apologize for starting late. Had a bit of a transportation problem, so please forgive me. As you know, I'm Gail Teixeira, Parliamentary Opposition Chief Whip for the People's Progressive Party Civic Members of Parliament and for the People's Progressive Party. On this program, we shall focus on matters of public importance, bringing you information and discussions on issues and matters that are of concern to you, the Guyanese public, every Thursday between 12:30 and 1:30 p.m. right here on Channel 6. Let me just, before we get into the meat of the program, let me just remind you, as always, of the phone numbers to use to call in to the program, and we usually start around 1 o'clock. So 225-0010 or 225-0008, 225-0010 or 225-0008. And as every week, I inform you and remind you of the Leader Opposition Office is open, 304 Church Street, between 9 and 5 in the afternoon. Sometimes we go a bit later, Monday to Friday, and from 9 to about 1 o'clock on Saturdays. And we have MPs that are in the regions allocated, the geographic MPs, and we also have MPs from time to time being in the office. The office is open. You would have to, if you wish to make representation of a matter concerning you, or something's bothering you, or that you have information to share with us, we'd much appreciate it. Please feel welcome to come to our office. We have, from time to time, Dr. Roger Luncheon there, former Prime Minister Sam Hines. We have also members of Parliament that come in during the week, and on Saturdays we usually have one or two of our MPs who are lawyers there to guide or help or advise on any matter that may be legal. So please feel free to come around to us, and of course we have MPs that go into the regions from time to time. In Region 9 we have an MP that has a public day every day at the Lethem Freedom House. In Region 1, 7 and 8 we have MPs that travel in once a month to go and visit, and so later in the program I'll share with you the time for Region 1, which I know about. Region 8 will be taking place probably in the middle of August, and Region 7 should be taking place, I'll give you that date as soon as I get it. The other regions, we have MPs at Freedom House, our Freedom Houses in those regions, who come to visit and meet the public. So once a week they try to come up in the coastal areas. And of course at Annandale on Saturdays we have MP Gillian Burton Prasad, who is there at the Annandale Freedom House office. So those of you who would like to have a chat with any of our MPs, please feel free to go to these venues. And the number at Church Street is 225-3432, 3432. Just remember 32 MPs, 32 is the last digits in the telephone number. Last week I'd also informed you, previous week I'd informed you about the Freedom Radio Anti-Discrimination Committee, and we've established a hotline that you can call in and report any cases of discrimination or matters that are worrying you in the job or in any matter that you're dealing with that you believe that you may be discriminated against, or people that you know of. And so that telephone number is 225-1479, 224-179. Well, wow, this week started with a bang, no? With the Monday, August the 8th, at the last parliamentary sitting before recess. And the exposures that the parliamentary opposition, by the questioning they did in relation to the supplementary financial papers for the various ministries, we discovered all sorts of scandals. But just to remind you, the two supplementary financial papers that came, one was almost $1 billion, 900 odd million, under the contingency fund, and paper two had to do with almost over $2 billion for what was called the consolidated fund. And this is being brought in August for a budget that's $220 billion, the largest that we've ever had in our country, and yet more money is needed. So this program will focus again on transparency and accountability and the violation of the procurement laws and regulations. And to just bring you up to date, the first paper, that is Supplementary Financial Paper 1, the Ministry of Agriculture admitted, Minister of Agriculture, Mr. Hull, admitted that the NDIA and the Ministry of Agriculture had not gone to tender for works totaling $234 million, and as I said, due to emergency works for El Nino and flooding in regions 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 10. Now, the NDIA's budget was $1.7 billion, according to the minister, and this was insufficient. Yet we'd reported on Region 5 with the flooding that this region was barely touched, and people were complaining for 2 months of the level of flooding in Region 5 with no help at all. So, in fact, these monies that, in our view, should have been put, the $234 million should have been put in the paper on the consolidated fund, and the minister admitting that they never went to tender, they just used contractors around the place. Nor did he say they went to get permission from the National Procurement and Tender Administration Board to not go to selective tender at all. So that the minister violated the Guyana Constitution and the Procurement Act. Then, of course, the Minister of Public Health under Supplementary Financial Paper 1 and again under Supplementary Financial Paper 2 included monies for rental of a drug bond with a crony of the government. And so, their first paper said that they had given $25 million to Linden Holding Company, following a cabinet decision, by the way, for the month of July 2016, and a security deposit. And in the discussion under questioning, the minister said, well, new GPC was being paid $19 million a month. This is totally inaccurate. The new GPC was allowing the government to use their 70,000 square foot bond when we had not had a proper bond. We had to move our bond from Kingston in order to facilitate the investment in Marriott. And so FDA, Food and Drug Administration, and the bond had to be relocated, and we didn't have the money at the time. And therefore, we used a new GPC. And so the Diamond bond was open sometime in 2014, I believe. So that new GPC never charged us any money to use their bond, which was certified by the PEPFAR, because of course under that project with HIV, AIDS and other drugs, we had to fit the American standards of where the drugs were being stored. So here it is that in the same supplementary, new GPC is paid $38 million for 4 months for rental to this government. And that works out to $9 million per month. And therefore the minister, Dr. Norton, misled the House when he said that $19 million was being paid to new GBC. In addition to that, by then going and giving Linden Holding Company the rental for a bond, it turned out that the $25 million was a security deposit 1 month and the other month for the month of July. Therefore, the cost for that bond is $12 million per month. Now, that having happened, of course, there was quite a lot of excitement in the House, and he was questioned about where is Linden Holding Company. We learned that it was 176 Middle Street, which happens to be what used to be called the Old Sidewalk Cafe. Now it is rented by Mr. Larry Singh and his company, where there's also a restaurant downstairs. Linden Holding Company, by the way, is not a new company. It existed before and was involved in transporting fuel to the Bauxite Company, and I assume that's why it was called Linden Holding Company originally. However, it has many investments apparently. So Sussex Street was the place where the minister said the bond was. And during the intermission with dealing with other items and coming back to the rental of the bond on the consolidated, which had another $62.5 million for the bond from July to December, we were able to go and look for the bond. And the bond turned out to be a private residence, incomplete, with no drugs and pharmaceuticals in it, as the minister had under question. He said, oh, there are medical supplies and drugs there. The building is now being constructed, and we got photographs of the construction going on inside as well as the building outside. This is a house. It is not a bond. It is nothing on the level of the new GPC bond, which had air conditioning units and areas of storage of 70,000 square feet. It is not anywhere on par with Diamond, which is owned, the Diamond bond, which is owned by the government and owned and under the management of the Ministry of Health, Public Health, sorry. And so why was there need to have another bond in Georgetown? Why was there need to have a bond in Georgetown, and why a private residence? Did this go to tender? The minister admitted that this didn't go to tender, that this was sole sourcing. It was asked if he had permission from the National Procurement and Tender Administration for sole sourcing. He did not answer. But nevertheless, in both documents it says this as per cabinet decision. So somewhere along the line, I assume the cabinet made a decision to give this to a company which has never dealt with pharmaceuticals, never had a bond, had a private residence which was now being converted into a bond. The property was only purchased a few months before the rental, and it is speculated that the money for the rental, the 25 million, is now going towards the rehabilitation of the building for the pharmaceutical bonds. This is a scandal of no mean order. In the meantime, of course, the total for the rental from July to December now amounts to 132 million for the Linden Holding Company for this property that, by the way, was purchased in the name of Larry Singh and then rented or facilitated with the Linden Holding Company, which he owns, which is then rented to the government for the grand total of 12 million per month. And after 2 months of rent, the building is still not occupied with pharmaceuticals. It is now being rehabilitated to accommodate the storage of pharmaceuticals and medical supplies. New GPC, by the way, has put out a press statement responding to this and saying that they never charged the government, that is the PPC government, for the rental of the bond while ours was being built, and where the one that was at Kingston had to be relocated because of the whole construction there going on with Marriott. FDA, as you know, was moved to the IAST building at the University of Guyana. So that this is unbelievable. Unbelievable that this is a lot of hanky-pankiness going on in this government. Violation of the procurement laws, sidestepping of the procurement laws, giving, as Minister Trotman said publicly, that people who had invested, supported the APNO AFC coalition during the election campaign had to have compensation for their investment, and therefore this is now part of the whole arrangement. And so, interestingly enough, because of the furor in Parliament, and by the way, the minister said he'd gone there several times and that there were pharmaceuticals and drugs there, when we asked him to describe where the building was, he said Sussex Street, and then I don't know what got into his brain, but then he started to say if you go down East Bank, you turn left, you turn right again. He didn't know the color of the building, etc., etc. So, I guess he was trying to save face. However, number one of the country has ordered a cabinet subcommittee to review the arrangements for the drug bond. So we wait with bated breath to see what will happen with this arrangement. Of course, I'm sure the Auditor General will have an interest in this too, and the NPTAB. So this was a day of revelations, as they say in the Parliament, a day of revelations. We then, of course, saw that the GDF received another 185 million to the already enormous budget, which increased in 2016 by $1 billion. But these monies, as exposed by the Auditor General in a comment to the media a few days before, exposed the use of the monies from the GDF to support the Jubilee celebrations, including doing works at Durban Park. So although it was said that this was Operation Dragnet and so on, in fact what happened was that this was for parades and ceremonial uniforms used for the Jubilee, and all of this $185 million. And of course, the same paper one had on the Capitol the monies for Durban Park, $400 million they are seeking for Durban Park. This is the Ministry of Public Infrastructure. Now remember that Minister Patterson took over the project on the instruction of number one in around April 2016, and Minister had said that he was putting 150 million into, from his budget, into the Durban Park. So 150 plus 400, 550, we already met the halfway mark of $1 billion. And then of course, there are contractors saying they own 200 million for the work they did since April in the Durban Park. And all this is for one day of activity when we had the National Stadium, which was ready and waiting, and it could have accommodated all this. And probably if there was any improvement, it would have been probably less than $100 million that had to be done. So that a one-day event cost almost $1 billion, because as we know, there's a part that the government refuses to talk about. Prior to Minister Patterson taking over in April, a private company, unnamed, unknown, had been given the work of preparing the land and setting up the whole system, all the stands and so on. And because of their inability to do that, number one man in the country gave the instruction to Minister Patterson to take over and get this done by May the 21st or May the 12th, whatever the date was. And so, who was this private company that was in charge? And why doesn't the government wish to say to us, who was this company? Who are these people? Who were the principals? How much money was spent from the Ministry of Presidency or any other ministry or Ministry of Finance for Durban Park prior to April? Why also, because a lot of businessmen were asked to give donations of sand and materials and so forth prior to April, why aren't those monies being accounted for? And said, okay, they received 200 million in donations, 100 million, including companies providing workforce from time to time, and including companies actually been awarded contracts where they were to be paid. Why is this so secretive? Why can this not be said? And why can't the public be informed? This is taxpayers' money. So, of course, again, secrecy, no accountability, no transparency. The government is absolutely tight-lipped on this, will not give information on this. And then, of course, we have the Ministry of Public Telecommunications, which was in December called the Ministry of Tourism and Public Telecommunications, and by the end of June was then reduced to Ministry of Public Telecommunications. However, they will receive another 451 million to include e-governance unit and the NFMU that now fall under this ministry. Formerly those were under the Ministry of the Presidency. Most interesting is that the government will now pay GT&T for internet relay and what is called LTE. Formerly they were paid for only the relay transmission by the government, by our government, on the 54 LTEs. These are the towers that carry the relay system. So it seems that the PPP project for the fiber optic cable to bring free internet to far interior areas has been abandoned. In fact, it seems that they have abandoned the fiber optic cable proposal coming in from Brazil whatsoever. And so we are now will be reliant totally on GT&T for the relay as well as the internet and data services. And when that goes down, which it did a couple of months ago and the whole system was down for the whole country, we will now be dependent on GT&T. The idea of the Brazil transmission of the fiber optic cable was to allow that if anything went down, there would still be an alternative to keep some of the system going. But more than that, it also means that the policy we had, that the far interior regions would not pay for internet and therefore equalize their access to the net with coastal people, that seems that will now be dissipated because the system is extraordinarily expensive that they're now doing with the inclusion of GT&T. So they haven't begun to start dealing with the cost of this what this will cost. We'll see that in the 2017 budget, however. And then, of course, there was another scandal in addition to the drug bond. And this was the Ministry of Communities agreement to pay $1.17 billion to BK International for Hagsbosch. Now, this was a case that started under our government. We took him to court for non-performance, and that the court ruled, but did not ascertain and did not give an award, financial award, to BK Tiwari. But it did make certain judgments in relation of BK International. The government decided, this government, in the meantime the government changes when the ruling comes in from former Chief Justice Chan. The government decides not to appeal the decision of the judge, and therefore then sits down and makes a settlement agreement with BK International for $1.17 billion for Hagsbosch, and this was work that wasn't done, by the way, and in fact paid him the first tranche before this supplementary financial payment came to the House. So this is for the second tranche of the $1.7 billion, which is $501 million that will go to BK Tiwari. When questioned in the House about what this was all about, why didn't the government go to the courts to appeal the decision, and to why did they hurry to give him $1.17 billion? On what basis? As the judge didn't award any cost to Mr. BK Tiwari, BK International. Under questioning, of course, it was then revealed that they're saying that it was a joint venture with BK International and Puran Brothers. And when asked who would be the payee, who had received the first $500 million and who would be receiving the second $500 million, the minister clamped up and refused to say who was the payee, who would be receiving, who had received, and who would be receiving the money from the government. The other thing that was unusual, of course, is that in all legal settlements or settlements of any kind, usually it is the Attorney General's office that comes to the Parliament for money to be able to pay settlements or what the court demands that the government pays. This is now under the Ministry of Communities, Minister Bulkan. So that this is a scandal of no mean order. This is very much like the Rhodesia case, where because of the refusal of the opposition in the last Parliament to allow us to pass the bill which would have removed the environmental tax so that we would have been in compliance with the Treaty of Chagaramas and the SET, and therefore the case would not have been at the level it was at the CCJ, because Rhodesia took us to the CCJ. They refused. Twice we brought the bill. Twice they opposed it. When they got into government, the CCJ ruled that Rhodesia had to be compensated, as they had requested. However, Rhodesia owed GRA huge amount of money which had not paid, and they admitted in the CCJ course that they had overinflated some of their costs, and therefore the court ruled that they should then be in compliance with the GRA. The government, instead of doing an offset where Rhodesia would have paid the government for the taxes owed and the balance would have been negotiated on a debt kind of management scheme where so much money would have been paid over a certain time, this government paid the money out to Rhodesia with no payment to GRA whatsoever. So it seems as if, this government seems to be treating the taxpayers' money as if it's sweetie. Just cast it aside and give it to who you want, regardless of what is happening in the courts, regardless of the sustainability of these and the impact of these on the economy, on some of the social safety nets and services that are offered to the people of this country. And so this again is another scandal. We also have the DDL, the write-off of DDL for $5 billion, of which there are now going to be companies in court saying, well, they didn't get these write-offs, and they were paying all the time, and therefore they want now to reach the same compensation and write-off as DDL did. And this could come, as Leader Opposition, Mr. Barjagdev had said, could come to $16 billion if all these companies go in and try to get the same benefits as DDL did. This was a settlement, a write-off for this. In Parliament, we've asked for what are the other write-offs that have been given, and the government has been absolutely tight-lipped and refused to, in fact, bringing in what is a confidentiality clause that doesn't exist, because in Parliament we're allowed to ask for this information and for it to be provided. Only if it's national security are we prevented from having that information. So were we to ask questions of the government in relation to certain equipment and stuff that might be sensitive to national security, defense and so on, we can't answer that. The standing orders are clear. However, when these are write-offs of taxpayers' money, we have a right to ask, and the government has an obligation to provide that information. Of course, the Speaker doesn't seem to enforce these issues in the House and demand that they bring this information. So we're now throwing away $1.17 billion to BK International. And by the way, there's the other issue with BK International, with picking up these containers, which he was not allowed to after the government changed. The court did not give him those. And the containers, apparently, what is said to be in those containers are approximately $800 million. So somewhere along the line there's a lot of cronyism and a lot of violations of what are basic procurement and financial rules and regulations of this country. Well, as a result of this generosity of the APNU AFC government with all sorts of cronies and financiers who supported them in the election period, it appears that we, the taxpayers, will have to brunt and face more hardships, because clearly these are unsustainable gifts that the government has made in the last 15 months of this government, and clearly the taxpayers will have to come in to fill the gap. So August 8th goes down. We ended at 3:30 in the morning, by the way, as a day of scandals and revelations. And most of all, the scandals and revelations of an incompetent government who is determined to not be transparent, not be accountable, and feels they can violate the procurement and financial laws of this country with total immunity. With total immunity. And so one can draw the conclusion that the government doesn't care. It can do as it pleases, and nothing will happen to it. And, you know, Dr. Luncheon said to a packed audience last night, PPP public forum we had on militarization, on the witch hunting, on discrimination, and on lack of accountability and transparency. Dr. Luncheon said to a public office, it seems as if the government attitude is, take it, stuff it, it's not going to be, nothing's going to happen to them. They're not going to do anything about it. And so, you know, we have, the papers have been replete, and some of the internet have been replete on a number of these issues that I've been speaking about with the pharmacy bond, etc. And so the public will decide what is really going on. But to go back to Luncheon, he says that, you know, if you want to establish an authoritarian state, one of the pillars is the denial of information. And we've been talking on this program about creeping authoritarianism taking place in this government. And so if you have poor governments, you have no transparency, and transparency only under exposure and then retrieval into their cocoon so they don't have to give the information, then you have the pillar being laid, the foundation being laid for authoritarianism in this country. And so these are developments that we have to watch, we have to be vigilant about, and to be not afraid to open our mouths. And certainly for the PPC, we are not. Well, for Georgetownians, let's switch to Georgetown now, because these are major issues I spoke about that has a national impact. But let's go to us, for the population in Georgetown. You are stuck with the parking meters as a fait accompli, a done deal, in other words. And so the Transparency International has made a very strong statement to do with what is going on in the parking meters and the exposure in the parking meters. And so I hope you will read that statement with great interest, because the parking meters, first of all, they had a cabinet group review the contract, and they're saying now they need an accountant to review the contract. This is all nonsense. The contract was not tendered for. It is a 49-year lease contract in which the government, the town council is stuck with this, paying 80% of the royalties and whatever else to the company getting 20%. But there's been a new revelation, and that is the contract has a very interesting clause in it. And that is that if for any reason the council decides to change its mind and tell the company that we're breaking the contract and so forth, the way the clause is in there, which is normally, it's not usually in a contract, the government, I keep saying the government, because for me the town council and the government are the same thing. It's all APNU AFC anyway. But you know, let me try to be correct. The town council has committed itself that were it to break the contract, were the contract to be broken, that it has to pay all of the payments to the company. So the company doesn't lose a cent in this process. And we, working and living in Georgetown, will be stuck with huge costs in terms of parking, the impact on the economy, the impact on the working people of this country, and the impact on the cost of living, and the impact on the business community, they are going to make this town a ghost town by this nonsense that they're doing. And so they feel they can get away with it, despite protests even from within the APNU AFC councillors, including the deputy deputy mayor of the town council, and then of course the two PPP councillors, Mr. Kapin and Mr. Tamishwar. So that we have a statement from Mr. Kapin that he reads, and this is about the fact that he has now asked for months, called for months of the town council for a forensic audit of the finances of the city council. Every time the town clerk makes some kind of technical argument to prevent it. So this issue of motions and certain things we bring to Parliament not being allowed, the fact that motions that have been brought in Region 4 have not been allowed, the fact that motions in the town council being brought, these are all brought by PPC people, are not being allowed or being pushed aside and shunted aside by all sorts of silly technicalities that actually don't exist on paper, that seems to be a government policy. It seems to be policy at a central level saying that don't allow these issues to come up. And so whilst all the commission inquiries have been held and the forensic audits into a number of entities of the state by the government when they came in, they seem to not want to touch the town council, the Georgetown Mayor and City Council. This, as we know, has been a slush fund for all sorts of things over the years. And please remember, the PPC never controlled the Georgetown Council. From 1992 on, it has been APNU, former PNC, GAP, GGG, who has now converted to APNU, converted to PNC. And so from 1992 to 2015, it was always the PNC, now morphed into the APNU AFC coalition. And so why don't they want the audit to go on there? We know there was a lot of stuff going on there for years. And so TIG has been also exposing this and also exposing that the same company for the parking meters paid for the visit to Mexico. So what do you expect? This is a conflict of interest. But so Mr. Kapin has continually pointed out that there's widespread, and quoting from his public statement, there is the widespread perception that corruption is rampant at City Hall. This perception is fueled by the lack of accountability for hundreds of millions of dollars spent on projects with no public tendering, improper financing reporting, 4 hidden bank accounts which are not included in any financial year, financial reports to the councils, and financial deficits being reported on a consistent basis every month. And he points out he has tried to bring a motion calling for forensic audits. He's been deliberately blocked, etc. So that, why, in their own volition, why doesn't the government, why wouldn't the government have an interest? And the Minister of Communities, which has the oversight under the law on the Mayor and City Council, why are they not interested in doing a forensic audit? Why haven't they said anything about the 4 secret accounts that must never be revealed to the councillors, even though the majority of councillors, except 3, are APNU AFC? So they have, again, there's more secrecy, more lack of transparency and accountable. And as of August the 8th, the government revealed a new dimension, that they cannot release certain information on the contracts that have been awarded, as they have to get permission of the other person or the contractor. This is unheard of in the Parliament. Unheard of. That the government cannot release any contract it has signed with a contractor or anybody else unless it has the permission of the person they've signed the contract with. This is a ruse and is an attempt to hide information from the people. Well, you know, when you have bad, you must have a little good in between. And so, one small victory in the courts. Town Council, Georgetown Town Council, brought trumped-up charges against Member of Parliament Bishop Edghill for having a derelict vehicle on his pulpit. Well, the case was dismissed yesterday. And of course, it is found that the constable who brought the charges, that the information she gave was manifestly unreliable. In fact, she got the color of the car wrong. She didn't seem to have the right car. That was, as she called it, derelict. In fact, it wasn't a derelict. And so the magistrate got impatient and dismissed the case and dismissed the charge against Bishop Edghill, Member of Parliament. And Bishop Edgell put out a press statement that says, during the trial, Williamson's testimony was found to be inconsistent, incoherent, and contradictory, which clearly revealed that the charge was designed by the city authorities to embarrass and defame Bishop Edgell, a sitting member of Parliament. Bishop Edgell was represented by attorney at law Says Gunraj. While this is a victory for Bishop Edgell, he is, however, seriously concerned about the abuse of the judicial process to target, intimidate, and victimize Guyanese for political and other purposes. He says, I quote, I am urging that we continue to build a society where social justice, fairness, and equity are upheld by all. Furthermore, I encourage public servants and officials in the employ of the state to be professional and refuse being used as instruments to settle political scores by the APNU AFC administration. So wise words from the bishop. And so as we're coming down the line, because I started a bit late, the targeting of our PPP members of parliament and PPP leaders. The case with Dr. Barry Ramsaran continues now, going into almost 15 months in Curvaton. And so almost twice a week, Dr. Ramsaran has to be in court, and most times the case is put down. It's not being heard. The lawyers on the other side keep wanting more time and so on. So that case is too much inconvenience and cost to Dr. Barry Ramsaran, and it puts him under the microscope all the time as a serving member of parliament. And then, of course, you know well the cases against Kwame McCoy that are being trumped up cases and are before the courts. And again, he too has to go before the courts every week, as well as the station, Evil Area to report on, etc., etc. Well, you know, none of this is surprising for those of us who lived through the late 60s, 70s, and 80s, and early 90s. This is nothing new. May have a new name, APNU AFC, but it's still the old PNC, still in charge, in control, like before. And so, you know, you can talk about APNU, AFC, coalition government. AFC and WP have morphed into the APNU. The coalition is a fiction. It's an absolute fiction. You know, what does WPP have in the coalition? What voice do they have? And more AFC is being muzzled and pushed aside and shunted aside by the APNU. It is all about control, and APNU intends to be the absolute controller in the government and in Guyana. This government, in a short 15 months, has demonstrated a level of incompetence and ineptitude that is mind-boggling. I said that before, and I'm repeating it. Taxation and more taxation, no economic vision and strategy and plan, the closure of the Wales estate and pending closure of LBI estate, the abandonment of the rice industry, and more scandals in its short 15 months of government than successive PPPC administrations was accused of in 23 years. Can you imagine? I could list them again. We've done some of these in the programs, and I've mentioned 4 today, right here. The mid-year report, which is required by law, has been tabled by the Minister of Finance, and next week we shall review the revelations of that report. No doubt the economy is in serious trouble, and the people are feeling it. I shall also address the government's rumor machine about drug money next week. Just suffice to say, these scandals reveal the government's cooperation with people who have serious, questionable, and some criminal activity in the contracts that they're awarding, most of them without abiding by the procurement laws of this country. Well, you know, we're very happy that the PPC has been named and passed in the Parliament with the 2/3 majority on August 8th. That was one good thing in the Parliament. And of course, I haven't dealt with the terrible situation of the previous Parliament to do with the debate on the Walter Rodney report. As Mr. Rohi, General Secretary of the PP, said, they have betrayed, the APNU, AFC, WP, have again betrayed Walter Rodney again in the Parliament and in our society again. So we have a lot to talk about, a lot of happening. And the problem is the government doesn't feel that it requires to explain to the people. We have other things to talk about. The issue of the military in government, and to compare it between what the PPP did and this government. And so the issue that the number one says about, you know, that why should the military have jobs, that's not the issue. That's not the issue. It's not the issue at all. It's the embedment of of the military, serving military, in line positions of the government. That is at stake, and there are differences. And we need to talk about that so that people are clear on what are differences between how the PPPC dealt with these issues and the APNU AFC government. Well, I think we've had enough talk about scandals, constitution, procurement laws. Let's now open the mics to allow the callers to have their say. And as I said, I do apologize for starting late. Transportation was a little bit of an issue. So thank you very much for being patient with me.
We're sorry, this number...
Okay, just be a little patient because I do have to reach a line, okay? So, the calls are, yes, in... Hi, good afternoon. Matters of public importance. Welcome to our program.
Hi, good afternoon, right?
Yes, good afternoon.
I'm calling pertaining to a news I saw last night on Sound Line.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm deeply annoyed about it. The Minister of Finance, Mr. Winston Jordan, he said that the UG students that now graduated are expecting to have big jobs and whatsoever, right? Now he says that this cannot be the case because what they need to do now is to go and hold on to whatever jobs they can find, be it a minibus conductor, security officer working at these small stores until they can get a big job after they finish university. So my question is, what was the reason for going to these universities in the first place when you could have invested all the time and money and start your own business from inception and work for 5 years? After 5 years, I'm sure you would have achieved a lot of things, probably on your way to own your own home, probably a vehicle, whatever. Now you've invested so much time in studying at university, and when done, this guy is going to say, you got to go and work as a security officer before you get the big job. To me, there's nonsense, what?
Well,
What kind of motivation are they showing towards the youth now that they claim during their rally that we're going to find jobs for the youth of this country? Now they're telling them they must go and turn security officers after they have a degree from university.
Yeah.
I don't know what's just, I'm really frustrated right now.
No, I agree with you, and certainly this government has done doublespeak on the youth issues over and over again. They said they fooled young people that when they got into government, the youth would have a place. They have no place. It is a bunch of older people, some of them as old in their 80s, going on 90, who they've given positions for, locking off positions from young people in the system. They have fired, the majority of people they fired in the public service and in the state entities after they got into government are persons under the age of 40 years old. These are considered your most productive people in your society, including a lot of them that had university degrees, masters. Then you have the minister coming and saying that, and the number one person in the country saying, you can't expect the public service to provide these jobs. We don't have jobs to give, therefore you have to be self-employed, you have to be entrepreneurs. Then you have the Minister of Finance bringing out the student loan and saying you can't leave the country unless you pay off your student loan. Then you have the president saying, well, that's illegal, you can't do that. And then you have also, as I know from a number of persons who have loans with their student loan that finish and are working, they're being told to pay off by August 31st. They get a certain reduction, and these young people are saying the jobs they have may be paying them maybe $80,000 to $100,000. They cannot pay off by August 31st. So these are basically, the government is youth unfriendly. They have an unfriendly position to the youth. They're doing nothing to help the young people in this country but frustrate them. So I agree with you on your point that you're making.
Right, I'm deeply annoyed about this, man. This is unfair. Study for 5 years at university, and then they're going to say in the government position that we do not have jobs for you. You need to go and work as a security or go and conduct a minibus. You have a degree to conduct a minibus?
But in addition to that, the minister himself, the Minister of Finance himself, has many degrees. And he had guaranteed jobs under the PPPC. So all this talk about discrimination and everything else. He was the director of budget one time. He was an advisor to Minister Jagdeo, was a junior minister in the ministry. He was kept on under Minister Ashney. He was kept on under this government. And Certainly, these are people that we wanted in the system because they had experience, they had training. The system needs people who have some education and they learn through experience, and this is the opportunity young people want. But they're making life difficult for young people completely, and it's very, as I said, anti-youth. Fundamentally, this government has an anti-youth position. And remember that 58% of the population of Guyana is under the age of 35. 58% of our population is under the age of 35 years old. And so, I don't know what their game is, but they
I seriously don't know. Now my parents had asked me, why did I even start to study at university? I recently completed now. Now my parents asked me, why did I even bother to go to the university in the first place?
No,
why didn't I go and learn to become a security? So much money my parents and time they've invested in me to send me to the university. It's not cheap, it's not free. You have to pay money to go there, you have to study so hard.
Yeah, it's not only the fees, it's transportation,
really
it's books, it's everything else. You know? But don't think it's a waste of time. A university degree is never a waste of time. It will come in useful, I promise you. And when we get back into government in 2020, our young people will be able to have jobs again in the public service, but also in the private sector, because of the slowdown in the economy, the private sector is also making people redundant, laying off workers, including people who have degrees. And so as the economy gets worse, it's going to be a problem. Don't give up hope. Tell your parents it was never a waste. Be grateful to them for what they've done for you, and keep your eyes open and see if you can hang in there. 2020, we'll be back in government. You don't worry. All right? Take care.
Thank you very much. I hope this country spins on back soon.
We have to make it spin back. We do not want to take it over like in 92 and start all over again like in 92, having brought it to where it was in 2015. Anyway, you stay strong.
I really hope that the youth that put these people in power listen to this program and watch the television, watch the news to see what their ministers that they put in power are actually doing. They need to be educated now, learn in these things that these people do now. And
not be fooled. They were fooled in the 2015 elections. They're young, they trusted these leaders and what they're saying, and they've really been abandoned by this government, and we have to be able to stand by them and to encourage them to stay strong and that listen and learn what's going on in the country. Anyway, we have to start winding down. They're sending me signs that I only have a few minutes. Thank you so much for calling. It's lovely talking to you. You have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Are you too?
Don't give up hope. Okay. Because I was late, we have a shortage of time. But we have missed some calls, and I do apologize to those persons. We're going to have a program just on youth, particularly because these are the persons who are really being impacted by this government in terms of their hope, their opportunities, and their future. And you can talk about entrepreneurship all you want. In our government, you had to have support for people being able to get loans and so forth. We had to negotiate with the commercial banks. We got a loan to do with small businesses to help people. People can't just set up bottom house and not have support. So even young people who have done the technical training positions, mechanics, electricians, plumbers, they need backing too. They need to buy their equipment, they need to set themselves up. Where is that support coming from? Having workshops and telling people and giving people lectures about the righteousness of entrepreneurship isn't going to make entrepreneurs. People need support, financial, technical, training, to be able to put themselves in order. And now that all these taxes have gone up for businesses and registration, this is a disincentive to young people coming off the bottom, trying to set up little bottom house or small businesses and so on. And because of the construction sector being downgraded, because there isn't a lot of activity going on, all those bottom house little entrepreneurs that were producing cement blocks and different joiners and wood and trimmings and so on for houses, they're basically twiddling their thumbs. They don't have enough work for them. And so we need to talk about that. There's much to talk about. Maybe I need to lobby with Mr. Sharma to give us 2 days instead of 2 hours instead of 1 hour, so we can have 2 different days. I'll see if I can see if I can lobby him, if you think it's a good idea. But anyway, we have to start winding down. And again, it's always wonderful to be with you, and again, and to talk about what's going on, and to share with you some of the things you may or may not see, because you may not be able to have look at the computer with the live streaming, and we in Parliament, and we have said to the clerk that many of our speeches get cut, or in the video that's there where you can look at it afterwards, our speeches are removed. And so you may or may not be able to see it. Of course, you don't see what's going on in Parliament on NCN, and therefore you have to either look at the live streaming or look at some of the internet media houses, Citizens Report, Dem Waves, for example, iNews, where you'll be able to pick up some of the things that are going on that don't go into NCN or GINA anymore. So as they're attacked us of not covering them, ditto, they're doing the same thing. So have a blessed week. It's important for you to be informed, to be able to make decisions of your own with information from all sides. The choice is yours. You have to make those choices. But if you don't have information, enough information to make proper judgments, and you're only being fed by a rumor mill with no substantiation from the government and its rumor mongers and spin doctors, you will not be able to know what's going on in this country. And that's the role that we're trying to play in this program, is to keep you informed. You make your judgments. You make your decisions. We in the PPPC have faith in the people of this country. So, as I close, have a blessed week as always. Take care of yourselves and your families. And remember, don't drink and drive. I always tell you that because we want you and your families to be together, and that you're able to take care of yourself and to be able to have a long, long life. So, until we meet again, right here on Matters of Public Importance on Thursday, next, 12:30 to 1:30, have a blessed week. Take care. All the best to you. Ta-ta.